Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Biz and the Bees. I'm especially excited today for today's conversation because my guest today is someone I had the pleasure of working with years and years ago at NBC Universal. Adrian was a talented developer back then, and he didn't just climb the corporate ladder, but he's found his way into a serial founder role. He's built multiple companies from the ground up, and his latest venture, Celebris, is a company that's revolutionizing the workspace by equipping employees with their own personal AI assistants. We're going to be talking about his incredible journey, the lessons he's learned from building companies from scratch, and the unique perspective on the future of work and AI. Adrian, it's been a while, man. It's good to see you. Appreciate you being
Yeah,
on the show.
good to see you too. Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, man. So why don't you start with a little bit of tell us a little bit about yourself, what you've been up to lately, and we'll dive into some deeper questions here.
Certainly. I guess I can start where we left off. Essentially, we used to work at NBC together. You were really managing the infrastructure side of things. I was, managing a team focused on the kind of APIs and content management system at the time, which was definitely a challenge. A lot of fires to keep putting out. So before, we mentioned before the show kind of a transition period that I went through in my career. There's been quite a few of those, but I'd like to touch on one that really kind of, goes back to where we met because NBC was very pivotal in my, yeah, sorry, I need to learn how to speak there. But no, it's pivotal in my transition over the time period. So
Okay.
when I was at NBC, I was more of an engineering manager, focused really a lot more on software. Over time, I got a lot more involved in the infrastructure side of things. I was very interested in a technology and a philosophy called a DevOps and, the agile development and really doing as much with automation as possible between the software engineering and the infrastructure engineering teams. Um, when I left NBC Universal, is we were basically kind of getting pushed around by the corporate titans of, the shared services group. Um, I decided that I really wanted to bridge those worlds, to get it to where we could get a lot higher velocity development. So I put a lot of my time studying technologies like Vagrant and Vagrant was cool at the time, not anymore. Like really got deep into containerization. Learned a lot about Kubernetes when it eventually came out. Started building my own Kubernetes clusters, and then it basically kind of came around. Now I was when I left NBC, I basically then transitioned to doing more of the consulting world. So
Mhm.
I was doing a lot of management, kind of technology consulting, which basically boiled down into giving people advice, and then having a lot of spreadsheets and presentations instead of developing code. It wasn't as fun. That ultimately led me though to working with the government. So I joined the federal government. In a tech team that Barack Obama had created called 18F, which was recently shuttered. Which unfortunately, because there's a lot of great people in the government that are trying to do great things, and I want people to understand that there's a lot of people getting affected that are really trying to help society. So I wanted to really make an impact in the government. Now I was term limited, my term ran out, and I wasn't able to achieve the things that I wanted to in that particular very bureaucratic organization. So I then basically decided to try my hand at entrepreneurship again. And I was very into basically building stuff because I've been so into just basically telling people what to do and, or telling people how they should potentially handle things. Not really making a lot of headway a lot of times because, as you know, there's a political angle to everything. So it can be very
In,
challenging
in
trying to,
politics, in
yes.
politics or not, there's a political angle to everything. I
Exactly. So it's
agree.
kind of feel like herding the cats, and I was like, "All right, I just want to build stuff. I want to make an
Yep.
impact by building stuff." So once I left the government, I put all my time into returning to literally the thing that got me into software development in my very early days in 2000. It was actually in the late 90s and 2000, which was multi-agent systems. In those days, it was really kind of relegated to the academic world. So
Mhm.
you had some, kind of work going on in the academic circles, but nobody really wanted to venture that far in terms of the architecture of agent systems inside an organization. There weren't a lot of job offers,
Hmm.
but I still love that world. And I spent many years, I even went to college for a program called Brain and Mind Studies because I was very, very interested in basically kind of modeling the mind through mathematical capabilities. And I started really kind of in the early days building these agent systems that could, they were kind of like trader bots. And the thing that it wasn't necessarily even about making money was that, there was a sequence of data and there was clear, guidelines that they had to follow. There's kind of a benefit function of, you're
Right.
either making money or you're not. You basically have these
Yep.
set of actions you can do. And so basically you had a way to build a program that could learn. Now it wasn't using complicated neural nets back in those days, but when the AI, when I got out of the government and I was, tired of doing just general like web development, I was tired of doing like general consulting, even in the DevOps space, which I really care a lot about. I was like, okay, well, let me return to my roots. And so I started building what I like to call a fishbowl. So it's basically a data integration agent management system that's meant to basically be a complete environment that runs either on a single node or a cluster of nodes via Kubernetes, manages its own resources, and then basically builds a colony of, kind of semi-autonomous, agents that communicate and work with each other. And then you could auto generate things like the APIs, which are normally the most tedious and labor intensive part of doing this development. Obviously, the least fun as well, which is why I was trying to automate it.
Sure.
So then that basically led me to meeting my co-founder Kieran. We basically met because we wanted to start talking about AI with each other. We really admired each other's ideas. We weren't really thinking about creating a business together. Um, so we'd meet weekly and just actually have discussions on AI. Like it could be anything from RAG or like how to basically process and parse documents or how to work with LLM orchestration. And so we learned a lot from each other because he has more of the business perspective and I have more of the tech perspective. So we kind of came together that way. And then over time, after, many months of that, we basically decided to create a business together in England. I've always wanted to go to Europe. I particularly love France. That's where I ultimately see myself, hopefully, if they'll ever let me in. Um, so yeah, like that's kind of how I ended up here. And so now I find myself working on a company, Celebris, which really is driving around the passion that I started with, kind of bringing
Mhm.
all of that experience of, essentially the engineering side of things and trying to, figure out how we can really employ AI to further the engineering automation side of things, as well as the infrastructure scalability, building on technologies like Kubernetes. And I'm happy to go into deeper into any of those, but that's
Yeah.
kind of,
I think it's always fun to, we always come home to our roots, right?
yeah.
That's as much as we try other things and other experiences are definitely important, but I think it's always good to return back to kind of where it all started. It's a great story arc that many movies and books and other media have followed, and I think it's always fun to talk to folks that have followed that same arc and come back and found that that's where the passion all started and that's where the fire was lit, and rekindling that and building it bigger is, and then you have the experience of being out in the world and seeing other things and knowing what not to do potentially, as you're
Yeah.
building that thing. That's awesome. So you kind of covered, you juiced a lot of my first question. So I'm just going to skip kind of to the bottom of the question and here. So as you were doing that, and as you were pushing through the serial founder roles, what were the biggest welcome to the deep end moments? So welcome to the, now you're stretching your legs pretty hard here in the founder position, especially that first
Yeah.
time probably. What were some of those moments, when you started down the founder role? Or that founder mentality.
Well, it's funny, Phil. I'm still having those moments daily.
That's good.
So they
Means
never
you're
go.
learning.
They never go away. Unfortunately.
That's
Well,
awesome.
like I love being in the deep end and continuously pushing myself. And that's I think one of the real benefits of entrepreneurship. Nobody can really tell you what to do. You basically got to try and
Mhm.
figure it out by learning as you go. And that's always been my preferred mechanism. I don't really like being told what to do, particularly when I don't really respect their like vision or their goals. And that's basically meant that on some environments where they're very top down driven, I don't really thrive in that particular environment. I'll be a lot more open than I should, candid than I should. So in terms of basically, going back to your question, In terms of what I've really kind of had to learn when I'm thrown in the deep end, there's one really big key thing that keeps coming up. And that's, as a technologist, there's different people who focus on different things and they love being in this zone. I'm one of those
Mhm.
people that really loves being in the zone and programming. Like if you interrupt me, I'm like, go away. Basically, like I want to like continue, and if I could have like a blinder on, that'd be perfectly fine with me. But in the world of entrepreneurship, particularly when you're trying to grow an early stage company, you have to focus on being a kind of a jack of all trades. You have to do a little bit of accounting. You have to do a little bit of marketing and sales, enough to where you basically, you really stretch yourself beyond the narrow kind of, passion that you might have. In my case, that's building something. Other people, they may really have a passion for sales, but not know how to build. But you can't sell
Mhm.
something that's really not doesn't exist. So at that point, you kind of have to learn how to at least evaluate building. So the entrepreneurship journey really comes back to being able to stretch yourself and handle pressure. Like, it has not been easy. My initial startups were more, a lot of times, consulting-esque. I did have a brief period of a failed startup in actually started around 2012, which I was working on kind of a predecessor to my current framework. It's kind of a decentralized, agent management system that could run over kind of a heterogeneous, network of servers. But that didn't really take off. I didn't have a way of monetizing it. I built a lot of cool open source technology then, but essentially, if you can't pay your bills, it doesn't really benefit anybody to. And I wasn't able to keep the projects alive. So it's really about, I think, just being able to grow yourself and also finding partners.
Mhm.
Um, One person can't do it alone.
Yeah,
Um,
those folks to fill those gaps and have the complementary skills that are necessary, right?
yep, yep.
It's certainly a way to expand capacity for sure.
But yeah, so I'd say those are the two main things. There's always, you're being pushed to the brink on many different, you're building technology solutions from, kind of prototype to trying to get them to some launchable state. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't for various reasons. I've had literally systems I was very proud of that fell apart because of pure politics at the agency or at the organizational level. And then, essentially then get the budget to continue. Um,
Yeah.
and that's really hard too when you see something that you really love that you're working on very passionately kind of fall apart because of something you can't control. But you just kind of have to keep moving on and keep believing in what you're doing. The truth is, I think if I was to give somebody like a piece of advice for entrepreneurship, don't go looking for problems that you think are popular. Look for
Ooh,
problems you're really passionate about that you know very well, and then don't let other people tell you not to work on those problems. Some people will
yeah.
tell you shouldn't work on those problems because there's 80,000 different venture funded companies. Like, the worst that can happen is you're going to gain a lot of experience in that area that could translate to a better job. The best that can happen is you're basically going to be able to turn it into something that could launch and take off because you are really passionate, you're really knowledgeable, and you can do a lot better job than somebody who's just basically doing it because it's popular. Um, so I would say, yeah, just follow your passions and basically be willing to learn and find the right partners. That kind of trio of things I think would help anybody.
Yeah, man, I love that advice. I was told a long time ago, you really need to enjoy what you're doing. You're gonna spend the most of your life doing it,
Yeah.
and if you don't enjoy work, you can make all the money in the world and it doesn't matter
Yep.
because you're gonna have not enjoyed your life. So I think that's solid advice to follow your passion. And normally, that does lead to it's not always the financial outcome you want, but the fulfillment of life is there for sure. So I
Yes.
agree with that. So that gets into sort of my next topic, and that's around culture. So as a serial founder, you've had the rare opportunity to create a few different company cultures from scratch.
Hmm.
Your current company, celebrates and really has the philosophy that AI can enhance an employee's well-being.
Hmm.
How does that external mission translate to your internal team building? And what do you learn about creating a stable, high performing culture inside Celebris
Yeah.
from day one?
That's a great question. So there's two parts to that I'll break down individually. The first of it is basically how AI can basically impact the culture and why I think AI is ultimately, could be good for corporate integration.
Mhm.
And then the second part I'll talk about literally kind of building the cultures and how I think the cultures are best structured based on my experience. So the first part of that is really about the AI integration. There is a lot of people right now having this kind of very loud dialogue in society that basically either AI is going to kill us all, AI is going to create this utopia, AI is going to take all our jobs, AI is going to, essentially destroy the economy, and AI is going to basically consolidate all the wealth, or it's basically going to, free everybody from work. Like there's all these different kinds of, what I call the hypesters and the doomers going around. Now, they are all, I think, they all have pieces of the truth. So I'm not trying to discount any one of them, but I think, as we learn in economics, there's, the world is always trying to come into some kind of equilibrium.
Um,
We basically are kind of in this cycle, and it's just basically trying to come in this equilibrium, and essentially, you know, it, we deviate sometimes, we get off track, and then that basically creates an overcorrection, and that basically kind of comes back. But essentially, when I talk about AI in the workplace helping, I envision a world where AI is augmenting humans instead of replacing humans. AI is basically giving us extra arms, extra legs,
mm,
extra, capacity. Imagine, Carl Jung in the in psychology realm once talked about, these counts of archetypes that we have in our head constantly. We have different archetypes that are constantly advising us about different things that are basically kind of unique, separate kind of identities that have their own kind of isolated personalities because they help us assimilate the information about the world. I believe that AI has that same transformative benefit to us if we use it correctly. Essentially, we need to basically diversify our AI usage. We need to bring in AI where it makes sense to actually help people. And this is where I get into my personal love of hybrids. I'm all about hybrid cloud. I'm about hybrid relation. I'm about hybrid, AI, like hybrid intelligence solutions. If chances are, if it's hybrid, I support it because that's really what the every single system in the universe is trying to kind of bring about is this kind of recombination of hybrid components. And so I think if we can basically create systems of hybrid intelligence that don't devalue humanity, but basically use humanity like a tree uses us for basically, providing or carbon dioxide so that they can provide the oxygen, then it becomes more of
right.
a symbiotic relationship instead of one that's about domination.
Sure.
And if we develop our AI systems in line with kind of a collaborative culture instead of a domination top down culture, then the agents are going to be a lot more creative and they're going to be a lot more free to express different kinds of ideas in a single system. So I believe that in curating an AI culture, we also have to look at essentially like we would actually look at structuring societies of humans in the future. There's going to be, I think, a profound shift in the world of AI to where we move away from the traditional web interfaces and more to background processing with a bunch of like assistants working in the background. And we have essentially smaller integrated displays or ways of working with them. And I think, technology is ultimately going to somewhat disappear, but it's always going to be there. It's going to be growing, but it's actually not going to be as visible in our face. The way we develop software in the future will change to actually develop, kind of semi-autonomous things, bots that can make certain decisions within, guardrails. It really builds on the automation practices that we started many moons ago with the Industrial Revolution, and basically even going back to when we figured out how to use fire. I mean, it's something
Yeah.
you can't stop. We're not going to stop AI. Now,
Un-
here's my fundamental concern. I'm concerned about two things. I kind of see Jeffrey Hinton's point that if the military gets their way and they create all kinds of autonomous weapons, then AI could run amok and kill everybody. Or it can basically take the feeling out of making that decision to kill somebody, which I think is just as bad. Um, or
and
we
we've already done to a large extent with remote warfare, right?
exactly and
I think that we've started down that path already. That's an
um,
interesting point that removal, it's even one more step removed because now I'm
Yeah,
not actually doing the controlling. I just set it
exactly.
in motion. I set it in motion from a distance
Yep.
versus controlling from a distance, which is, again, removed.
Yeah.
Once again removed. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, 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 that's a great point, and it's basically kinda like what the drone pilots when the drone programs were coming out, the
Yep,
drone pilots were a lot more willing to make that kill decision, or
that's
basically,
right.
without the repercussions because it's more like a video game. That
That's
is
right.
entirely possible. And the other area that I think is actually much more profoundly, devastating that could create a dystopian society is literally the concentration of wealth that it could bring. And
I
this
mean,
is essentially I love open source. I build mostly open source. I believe in open source. I use it like I believe that the only way AI really works for the good of society is everyone has access. Because of my belief that hybrid intelligence is going to create new capabilities for evolving humanity beyond just basically needing to menial like do menial labor, we'll basically be able to parallelize ourselves a lot more. But if we basically don't have access and certain people have all the access, then that's going to create this acceleration of divergence of wealth and power. And so I think that we really need to have some kind of regulations or some kind of economic mechanism that basically brings the AI world back to more of kind of shared prosperity, community wealth building, that kind of thing.
mhm.
Distributed computing, like essentially so that we don't have data centers that are as big as Manhattan. We basically have data centers in every city that basically network together that are basically more energy efficient. Like, I mean, that are owned by the municipalities or by the governments. Like, or owned by the people in that community. Like if we become, truly dependent as a means on AI to help us actually further our own economic goals, then it is very, very problematic if few billionaires basically have complete control of those means of production. Because in the
Well,
past, oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
In the past, humans always had the ability to rise up against people that mistreated them. In the
So,
future, we're more likely to have robots. Now, robots could basically diminish the value of humans in certain way. And so essentially I believe that if we have this kind of concentration, it'll be further spread from say essentially the people that will create gated cities and basically they'll kind of live in a bubble and then there'll be the rest of humanity that basically lives on scraps. And that's what I don't
yeah.
want to see. I will
Well,
be
I think there's a third element too you can add to that bucket, is the knowledge. So what is true?
yes, exactly.
I think that the trueness. So I tell it. I see a scene. You see a scene. We see the same scene. I tell it. I tell my version. You tell your version. We're both right, but the truth lies somewhere between what you saw and what I saw, and it's hard to. It's difficult to get that really well articulated.
Yeah.
And the idea and the possibility of controlling that narrative, controlling a narrative, is that's as terrifying as anything for me, in that sense. So,
Oh yeah.
um, you know, and it'll be interesting to see how that works out and how that plays out. So,
There's a lot that needs to be considered with AI. I mean,
yeah,
a lot of people that discount it like to consider it another like Bitcoin type technology or like another blockchain. And I can understand because there was a lot of hype around blockchain. Everybody was saying blockchain was going to change the world. And here we are still in 2025. Basically, it's still not used in basically, but maybe like,
yeah.
0.005% of like
I
the
still have cash. I still have
exactly
cash.
like, Bitcoin hasn't changed anything because it's really a limited technology. It's basically a distributed ledger. Like that's all it is. And that has
Right.
that has very limited practicality, in terms of like the use cases. Um, but AI is a lot more generic. It can be used in many different use cases. And that's what we're seeing drive the adoption and the excitement right now is everybody's kind of seeing AI in their own way. They're seeing how AI could essentially apply to their own world and their own processes. And that's actually really good, as long as we basically all basically try and have a situation to where we're trying to grow. If we basically just stop and throw everything to an AI, that's not good for us, obviously. But if we're, constantly trying to improve ourselves with the likes of AI that can grow with us, then it basically becomes like a tutor or, an advisor, that kind of thing.
Yeah. One of the areas I'd love to dig in next on, kind of in that space, you talked about it a little bit earlier, and you've kind of circled back around to it, and that's AI in the workflow and the market itself.
Yep.
As a founder who's always had to anticipate where the market's going, what do you see as the biggest challenge in making personalized AI successful in the workplace? Is it the technology itself, or is it more about the human element, like building trust in the AI output, sort of this knowledge that we talked about, or even tracking a skills gap by finding people who can effectively bridge this powerful new tech with the day to day needs of a business? Like, how do you see this playing out? You're actively integrating in a real way AI into daily work flows.
Mhm.
Where do you see that going?
So it's interesting. I actually see there are a few aspects of that have some potential issues that you run across when you actually try and develop AI solutions for companies. One, and this is kind of a core foundational thing, is data quality. A lot of
Okay.
organizations simply aren't. They don't have the data to make AI personalizable enough to their organization, or they don't have it in a format that's easily usable. You have
We
to.
we we jokingly say you don't have the intelligence to be artificially intelligent yet.
Exactly. I mean, and if you
Yeah,
don't start with that capability, there's a limit to what you can grow, to how far you can grow with AI.
and the quality.
Yeah,
To your point.
it's kind of like, I don't know if I can say shit in, shit out. Like, if you need to cut that,
Yeah,
but
it'd be
yeah,
fine.
like, but anyway, like, yeah, in data science, it's all about literally, learning from the data. In
Yep.
machine learning really is a derivative of data science more than it is like engineering and software engineering. These, AI model code is like a lot of them are like single files and can fit on, you're not talking about a Microsoft Windows level of coding here for these models, particularly with the frameworks like PyTorch and stuff. So the coding is not the problem. Even the tweaking of the models, essentially, and I don't even really believe that the actual data limitations that we're running to with quantity is the problem. I was watching a YouTube video the other day that was talking about how a lot of times, even these large AI models will end up having certain chains of thought that they repeatedly go over. So these neurons are repeatedly activating, other ones are basically never activated. I think in terms of basically having data that's relevant, what you want to do is have a knowledge set that enables you to have the smallest model possible to train on data that's going to make it as effective as possible with that smaller model. And then you need to basically have some reliability of outcome. And this is a big problem with AI agents today because essentially AI agents rely on what a lot of people call tool calling, what I call basically the executing actions in the environment. But essentially, it boils down to an AI has to determine what to do next, and it basically has a certain number of options, then basically have a certain number of parameters. And so if you basically have this data that's all wrong, or basically it's not able to access the data, it doesn't know how to use the tools, or it doesn't know how to use the capabilities. You don't have any data to really feed into the tools, even if you have, say like an MCP tool server that basically you can integrate into your models. That still relies on having a really good data set that you can essentially feed in either through RAG or fine tuning or foundational, training, which normally you're not going to work at the foundational training level unless you're dealing with something that's not a conversational agent. But yeah, the data is the number one problem that I see foundationally. The second one is political. And this is some people, particularly in the lower rungs of the organization, fear AI. Um, they fear it's going to take their job. And it's I can understand their fear. I I got to be honest with my co-founder is not a developer, and he's been presenting me these really detailed web interfaces that he's been building in AI that would take me
It's
like
wild,
if I
right?
was to do them months to do, like I'm and so he's already without this experience beating me in productivity on web development. Now he doesn't have all the nuanced experience that I do, and he basically gets to a point to where he can't, like go any further. But that initial kind of, it's that would make me worried if I didn't embrace it. Um, I would be scared to death, and so I don't blame people for being scared. But the only way that you're really going to make it work is if you are the one that's able to leverage the AI most effectively and then spread that.
That's
Because
right.
if you're able to leverage the AI and you're able to, hook it up with different systems, you're able to even make it to where it could train other newbies. There's a large degree of benefit in having AI just as a translation layer. I mean, think about as a manager, you've been a director of infrastructure when I was at, NBC. And so imagine the people that you had to tell the same thing twice. Now imagine if you could tell that to a single person, basically that kind of amplified across the organization or your team without you basically having to
Well,
take the time.
just becomes native knowledge at that point, right?
Exactly.
This,
And
this is this is the rule set.
yep. And that's what I think the real benefit is because then if you combine that kind of data focus with the full embrace of AI, not to replace people, but to build extra arms and eyes and ears and, toes, even, like, you basically have this capability of growing at a accelerated rate. And we are finite beings. We have a end date. Like, I would
That's right.
much rather achieve more in my years than less. Like, if you look at it in that way, instead of basically comparing it to what I always did, then you see a lot of opportunity. And then you can
Well,
actually bring people on board. Um,
that's right.
but
Look, fire was terrifying in the beginning, right? It was mysterious and it was terrifying, I would imagine. And now you walk around with a lighter in your pocket like it's no big deal, right?
exactly.
Like it is a mental shift, and I agree. It's a tool that is to be embraced and used properly. Not everything's a nail just because you have a hammer.
Yeah.
But it is a good tool in the tool belt, and it's a fairly advanced tool, I think. So
Yeah. Well, the advancement is really in the eye of the programmer at the end of the day. I mean, I think you obviously have so much that can come out of models. And, there's a scale of advancement in the AI models. So obviously there is true innovation that's going on there in terms of training. But the truth is, I've seen even great models fall apart when they're asked to orchestrate complex situations. And that I think is where we really get into more of the complexity in the new modern systems because you have to literally have a single state LM that can basically orchestrate across a cycle of executions to achieve a single outcome, basically, relying on knowing where it's been, where it's going, and getting that right has been a real big problem with the multi-agent or the should say the AI agent community.
yeah,
And it's something that I'm even after all this time I'm still working on. It's a tough problem, technically speaking.
solvable though, sir. I think
Yes.
we'll be there faster than we think. In all honesty,
Oh, I
so
agree completely. Especially at the speed people are working on it. And
that's
yeah,
right.
I don't think
It's
there's
it's
let's say.
it's daily, right?
Yeah.
It's literally a daily log in today to see what's new kind of thing.
I mean, there
It's the ultimate dopamine hit at this point.
yeah,
It's better than Facebook, if you're
yeah.
keeping up with it.
Oh, I agree completely. I mean, I like to say this. There is a lot of people telling other people not to basically learn to code, not to go into technology. There's no future there. I think there's never been a more exciting time to go into technology. Go get that computer science degree. Go basically join a tech, maybe you start off as an intern at first, but do it. Like the more that you're able to actually understand what's coming out and basically tune these models, then there are more possibilities you can bring to society in all different types of areas. I mean, it's like having a squishy kind of fuzzy logic machine that you can shape to your will in some degree. It may not always agree with or abide by what you say, but you can constantly be trying to like tweak it to get it there. And if you basically design, and this is one of the things that we really do that's different than a lot of people. A lot of companies are basically trying to build a single big agent that does everything. And they market this big agent as a single name. What we are trying to do is, like I said in the beginning, build a fishbowl to where it has a bunch of small agents that we call cells that, basically communicate, and they're very limited in what they can do. So you may have one, agent that only has 2 commands that it can call. Maybe it's a binary state machine, but that is
Mhm.
very important, and it doesn't have many parameters, so it basically has less room to get it wrong. And if you have
That's
that
right.
working with another specialized agent with a completely different model, maybe they're doing fact checking. Well, one of them's writing, one of them's doing fact checking, one of them's writing, like, or one of them's doing refinement, like, and they could all be completely different doing their own specialized thing, much like us. I mean, we have specialization of labor for a reason. It basically helps bring the economies of scale. And I think
That's right.
that's one of the things that I think we're going to see a lot more of going forward. Right now, multi-agent systems are kind of like the fringe, even in AI agents, because they're harder. You have to do a lot more in the word, communication. It's not basically just firing off another agent and basically letting it run to completion like Claude Code. It's basically you have to let these agents talk to one another. And I also think there's going to be a lot of future benefit in basically using these multi-agent systems as they grow for academic research in the social sciences, like economics, psychology, sociology. I'm very excited about that area because
Yeah, I think the sciences in general are gonna be a great new frontier as we get things, buttoned up and a little more ironed out, so well, look, Adrian, this has been awesome, man. I appreciate you, taking the time to talk to us. It's fun to listen to the mind of a founder, especially in this space that's so exciting and upcoming, so, I appreciate the time and the effort and your unique view on and insights on these things. Hey, for anybody who wants to follow on your work or learn more about Celebris, what's the best way to get in touch with you guys?
So, yeah, you can go to our website at Celebris.com. So it's CELL as in cell, like the biological cells, Celebris.com, and see us there. You can, connect with me on LinkedIn. I don't, I must admit, I'm a social media Luddite these days, so I don't have a Twitter account. I'm not cool like that, so I can't really help people there. I am on Reddit, but I don't know if people would be like, kind of, yeah, but yeah, essentially, come to Celebris, come hit me up on LinkedIn. You can see my, Celebris is clearly on my experience, so you'll know when you find me. Um,
Nice. Well, we'll be sure to link all those things in our show notes for you as well. Adrian, a
awesome.
huge thanks, man, for your time today. I appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to be with us on the Biz and the Bees. Folks, if you enjoyed this conversation, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps us out. And we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Phil. I enjoyed being here.
Thanks, Adrian.
All right. Have a good one.